It was a night that no one expected to change the course of anyone's life, but it did. She stood there, at the entrance of an exclusive, lavish gala, her heart racing as she clutched the invitation tightly in her hand. The thick, golden-embossed lettering on the envelope almost felt like a weight in her pocket, promising access to a world she had only dreamed of. But as the massive, ornate doors were about to open to what could be the most significant night of her life, something unexpected happened. The bouncer, a giant of a man with a stern face, gave her a look, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. His lips barely moved, but the words he spoke were loud enough to shatter her excitement. "You're not on the list." For a second, time seemed to stop. The golden opportunity she had worked so hard for, everything she had strived for, just slipped away in an instant. She tried to explain. She wasn't a stranger here, she belonged, or at least she thought she did. The invitation was real, she had every right to be there. But the bouncer wasn't budging. The security guard's cold, dismissive glance made it clear, she wasn't welcome. She felt the sting of rejection as her dreams of mingling with the city's wealthiest and most powerful people seemed to evaporate in front of her eyes. But just as she was about to turn around, head low, to walk away and face yet another failure, something extraordinary happened. A voice interrupted the tension, smooth and commanding, yet strangely familiar. "She's with me." The voice belonged to none other than the billionaire who was hosting the event. You know the one, a name that has been whispered in the most elite circles, a self-made mogul, someone whose success seemed to defy the odds. What happened next would send shockwaves through her life and change everything she thought she knew about who she was. You see, at that moment, the billionaire didn't just offer her entry into the gala. He offered her something far more valuable, a chance to step into a world where rules don't apply, where power and money govern everything, and where no one ever gets left out, or do they? But here's the catch. You're probably wondering what could have possibly made the billionaire recognize her in that sea of faces. Was it her ambition? Her drive? Or was it something else entirely? And more importantly, what's really at stake for her, and for him? Stick around, because by the end of this story, you're going to know the answers to all of these questions. And trust me, what you'll uncover is far more than just a story of an unexpected connection. It's a tale of survival, of ambition, and of what happens when worlds collide. Now, I want you to think about something for a second. Have you ever had that moment where the universe, it feels like, is giving you one last chance? A moment that could change everything for you, or possibly leave you wondering what could have been? Well, for her, that was tonight. But things are never as simple as they seem, are they? As you're about to discover, this seemingly random encounter at the door isn't just some fairy tale moment. The stakes are high, and what's to come will leave you questioning everything you know about the way the world works. This is a world where every move counts, and where even the smallest mistake could cost you everything. But before we get into all of that, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt out of place, like you didn't belong in the room you were in, like you were playing a game that you didn't quite understand? Because, trust me, that's exactly how she felt as she entered that event. Out of place, unsure, but desperate to prove herself. So why did the billionaire recognize her? What was it about her that caught his eye, and what role did he play in the story that would change her life? I know you're dying to know, and in just a moment, you'll understand why the billionaire took notice. But let me tell you this, the real mystery isn't just about how this encounter unfolded. It's about what happens next. It's about how the power dynamics in this room are about to shift in a way that no one, least of all her, could have predicted. But before we dive deeper into that, I want you to pause and consider how many times in your life you've had doors closed in your face. How many moments have you let slip through your fingers? It's tough, isn't it? But what if the next time you faced rejection, it was just the beginning of something far greater than you could imagine? Keep that thought in mind as we dig deeper into this unbelievable story. Because, trust me, what happens next is nothing like you expect. And if you think you've seen it all, if you think you understand what's about to unfold, think again. You're about to witness the twist that will leave you on the edge of your seat, hungry for the answers that will finally be revealed. This isn't just a tale of a denied invitation, this is about a chance at redemption, a world where everything can change in an instant. So, hang tight. Keep watching, because I promise you, What comes next will blow your mind. As she stepped into the extravagant lobby, the weight of the moment wasn't lost on her. The golden chandeliers overhead cast a warm, almost oppressive glow on the marble floors, and the whispers of the city's wealthiest elites filled the space. She could feel eyes on her, sizing her up, appraising her in ways that made her skin prickle with discomfort. It wasn't that she didn't belong here, she was well aware of the status symbol this event represented, but it was the feeling of not knowing if she truly belonged. The glittering crowd seemed to move in perfect harmony, like a well-rehearsed orchestra, each individual more polished than the next. But she was different. She had always felt different. Her rise had been a constant climb, a battle for validation, a relentless pursuit to prove herself to a world that never seemed to fully accept her. That's what had driven her to this point. It wasn't just the invitation that had come in the mail, a sleek envelope embossed with gold, the kind that made it seem like the universe itself was telling her to take this step forward. No, it was more than that. Her mind replayed the past few weeks, and the pieces started to click together. She had worked her way up from the ground floor of a small startup, clawing her way into a world dominated by the kind of wealth and power she could barely imagine. Her work had caught the eye of several influential players, and the invitation was a result of her latest deal, a partnership with a tech mogul who had strong ties to the billionaire hosting tonight's gala. This wasn't just a social event for her, it was her shot at a breakthrough, her chance to be seen by people who could take her to places she'd only dreamed of. But if the invitation was supposed to be her ticket to success, why was she now standing at the door, rejected? The bouncer had seen her as just another face in the crowd, but it wasn't until the billionaire stepped in that everything changed. But why him? The question gnawed at her as she tried to steady her nerves. There were a million reasons she could think of why he might have noticed her, but none that made sense. She wasn't a socialite. She wasn't part of the in crowd. So, why did he recognize her? Her thoughts were interrupted as a soft, almost surreal voice broke through the noise in the room. The billionaire. He was at her side now, standing so close she could feel the intensity of his presence. She could see his eyes scanning the room, but there was something different in the way he looked at her, something more purposeful, more calculated. He had the air of someone who was always 5 steps ahead of everyone else in the room, and yet, for reasons unknown to her, he had just inserted her into his world. Was it a favor? A gesture of kindness? Or was there something more to this chance encounter? As the gala continued around them, the billionaire led her into the heart of the event, his presence casting a shadow over the rest of the room. They were immediately surrounded by influential figures, other billionaires, politicians, celebrities. Her head spun, and she tried her best to act composed. But the unease didn't leave her. It was as though everyone was watching, waiting for something to happen. And they weren't the only ones keeping an eye on her. There was another man, someone she hadn't expected to see, someone who had been in her orbit before, but whose presence here, tonight, raised more questions than answers. John Carter. His name had come up during her recent dealings, but their interactions had always been brief, distant. He was a silent partner in one of the projects she'd been involved in, a man whose reputation was as shadowy as his investments. He wasn't in the same league as the billionaire, but his connections were vast, and he had the kind of resources that could either make or break a person's career. As she locked eyes with John across the room, she felt a cold chill creep down her spine. There was something about his expression, a mixture of recognition and calculation, that made her stomach turn. He hadn't expected her to be here, and yet, here she was. And it wasn't just John who was watching. Others in the room, people she didn't recognize, were also eyeing her with a strange intensity, as if she were the subject of some unsolved mystery. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, and it unsettled her more than she was willing to admit. Her focus, however, kept drifting back to the billionaire. His name, Tyler Westbrook, was synonymous with success. A self-made entrepreneur who had risen from obscurity to build one of the most influential empires in the world, Tyler had built his fortune on a combination of ruthless ambition and savvy business moves. But for all the power and wealth he commanded, there was something about him that was off. He was charming, yes. But it was a cold charm, the kind that made you feel like a chess piece in a game where the rules were constantly changing. It was almost as if he was studying her, as though he was trying to figure out who she was beneath the surface. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he knew, something he wasn't telling her. But why bring her here if it wasn't a mere accident? And what did it mean for her future? The tension in the air seemed to grow thicker with each passing minute. John Carter had started moving toward them, and she could feel the weight of his gaze on her as if he knew more about her than anyone else in the room. What did he want from her? Did he think he could control her? Or was there something else, something more sinister at play? Just as the questions began to consume her, Tyler turned to her, his voice soft, his gaze unwavering. "I didn't bring you here just to watch from the sidelines," he said, his words sending a shiver down her spine. "Tonight, you're part of something much bigger than you realize. And if you play your cards right, this could be the beginning of everything you've worked for." She couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. What was this bigger thing? And why was Tyler involving her in it? Just as she was about to ask, the room fell silent. The spotlight shifted, and she felt all eyes turn to her once again. Something was about to happen, something she wasn't prepared for, but she would have no choice but to face it head-on. The atmosphere in the room shifted as the billionaire, Tyler Westbrook, led her deeper into the heart of the gala. For a moment, it felt like time had slowed down. The sparkling glasses, the rich laughter, the power plays, all of it blurred into the background as she tried to grasp onto something solid. But the more she looked around, the more out of place she felt. These people didn't belong in her world. The high-end couture, the sparkling diamonds, the unspoken rules, they all weighed heavy on her, pulling her into a world that felt less like an opportunity and more like a trap. And just when she thought she might finally get a grasp on her footing, everything started to crumble. Tyler's voice, once warm and inviting, now felt like an echo of something darker. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but his words earlier about being part of something bigger, something important, began to feel more like a warning than an invitation. She wasn't just here for business or pleasure. She was a pawn in something much larger. She didn't know what it was, but she knew it had to do with Tyler, and it had something to do with John Carter. The fact that John had shown up at the gala wasn't just a coincidence, not when she thought back to the way he had watched her across the room, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite decipher. Was it recognition? Or was it suspicion? What did he know about her? What was his connection to Tyler? Her thoughts were interrupted when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, and her heart skipped a beat as she read the message. "Stop digging. You're in over your head." The message was from an unknown number, and there was no way to trace it. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Who could have sent this? It didn't take long for her to realize it had to be someone connected to this world she had just stepped into. Someone who didn't want her uncovering the truth. But what truth? What had she missed? Her mind raced as she scanned the room, but everything seemed so perfectly staged, so meticulously curated. No one seemed out of place, yet it felt like the whole event was designed to throw her off. She made her way to the bar to grab a drink, hoping to clear her mind. As she stood there, staring into the swirling colors of the drink in her glass, a woman approached her. She had the grace of a dancer, the poise of someone who knew how to command a room, yet there was a quiet intensity to her that unsettled her. The woman introduced herself as Elena Grayson, one of the event's high-profile sponsors. Elena's smile was polite, but her eyes, sharp and calculating, gave away little. She was interested in one thing, and one thing only: what had brought her to the gala. Elena's voice was soft but carried an undertone that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. "You seem out of place, darling. Are you sure you know what you're getting into?" There was a veiled warning in her words, as though Elena wasn't just making small talk but probing, trying to gauge how much she knew. She tried to mask her unease, offering a polite smile. "I'm here to make connections, just like everyone else," she said, trying to sound casual. Elena's gaze lingered a little too long, her smile never faltering. "Be careful," she added, her tone changing ever so slightly. "Not everyone here plays by the same rules." Elena turned and walked away before she could say anything else. The words echoed in her mind, but they didn't give her answers, only more questions. What did Elena know? Was she a friend or a foe? As she tried to make sense of this new piece of the puzzle, something in the back of her mind clicked. The invitation. There was something off about it, something she hadn't noticed before. It had been delivered in person, by a courier who, now that she thought about it, had looked more nervous than professional. Had she missed something? She excused herself from the crowd, finding a quiet corner of the mansion to check her bag. She pulled out the invitation once again, examining it with fresh eyes. The luxurious paper, the gold embossing, it all seemed perfect. Too perfect. And then, she noticed a small tear on the edge of the envelope. It was barely noticeable, but something about it didn't sit right. She hadn't seen it before. She carefully pulled out the invitation, only to find a hidden slip of paper inside that hadn't been there before. Her breath caught in her throat as she unfolded it, the note scrawled in neat, but hurried handwriting. "They're watching you. Don't trust Tyler." A chill ran down her spine. Who could have put this note inside the invitation? And why hadn't she noticed it before? She stuffed the note back into the envelope, her mind racing. The tension in the room had shifted again. People were starting to gather near the stage, preparing for the night's speeches and announcements. She glanced over at Tyler, who was speaking to a group of wealthy investors, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes were fixed on her. Had he noticed her slip up? Was he aware that she was onto something? Before she could turn back to leave, someone touched her arm gently. She spun around, startled. It was John Carter. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. His eyes held a dangerous glint. "I've been looking for you," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk." The last thing she wanted to do was get any closer to him, but something told her she couldn't ignore him. She followed him, heart pounding. As they moved through the crowd, he led her to a quiet balcony overlooking the city skyline. The cold air brushed against her skin, but it did nothing to calm the growing storm inside her. "You don't know what you're involved in," John said, his voice softer now, but his words were laced with something more urgent. "Tyler isn't who you think he is." She was about to ask him what he meant when her phone buzzed again. The same unknown number. "He's using you," the message read. "Get out now." The ground beneath her feet seemed to shift, and the pieces of the puzzle were slipping out of her hands faster than she could put them together. Was Tyler using her? Or was there someone else pulling the strings? Just as she opened her mouth to confront John, a loud noise echoed from inside the mansion. The lights flickered, and the crowd's murmur turned to whispers of panic. Something had just gone horribly wrong, and whatever it was about to pull her deeper into the web of lies, deceit, and betrayal. She had to make a choice: trust John, trust Tyler, or risk losing herself in a game she didn't fully understand. But one thing was certain: nothing was as it seemed. And as she glanced around the balcony, she saw a shadow in the distance, a figure moving toward her. It was too far away to see clearly, but the silhouette felt too familiar. Was it Tyler? Was it someone else? Or was it the very thing that would push her toward an answer, whether she was ready for it or not? As the figure moved closer, her heart pounded harder, each step echoing in her chest like a countdown to something she couldn't yet understand. The shadows around her seemed to deepen, and she strained her eyes to make out who it was. It could have been Tyler, but something in the back of her mind told her it wasn't. She couldn't explain why, but the way the figure moved, so deliberate, so purposeful, felt off. As the silhouette neared, she caught a glimpse of the person's face, sharply defined features under the dim lights, a familiar intensity in the eyes. It was John. But something in his expression made the blood run cold in her veins. He was looking directly at her, yet there was no warmth in his gaze, no trace of the urgency he'd shown before. He was distant now, almost calculating, as though he was weighing her every move, waiting for her to make a mistake. His lips parted as if he was about to speak, but before the words could form, her phone buzzed again, this time with an unfamiliar name flashing across the screen, one she never expected to see. It was her brother, Michael. Panic surged within her. She had spoken to him only a few hours ago, and nothing in that conversation had seemed out of the ordinary. He had always been the steady one in their family, the voice of reason. But now, looking at his name on her phone, she felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She answered quickly, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. "Michael?" The line crackled with static before his voice came through, low and urgent. "Get out. I don't know who you've gotten involved with, but you need to leave that event right now. Trust me." The calm certainty in his voice threw her off balance. He had never been one to panic, to be the bearer of bad news. Yet, here he was, sounding more like a man desperate to prevent something catastrophic. "Michael, what are you talking about? What's going on?" Her mind raced, trying to piece together the connection between her brother, the gala, and the cryptic messages she had received. Before he could answer, the line abruptly went dead, leaving nothing but a hollow, eerie silence in its wake. Her pulse quickened. Something wasn't right, and whatever it was closing in on her from all sides. Her instincts told her to leave the gala, to get as far away as possible. But a gnawing sensation in her gut told her that running would only make things worse. She needed answers, and she needed them now. The stakes had never felt so high. As she turned back toward John, the air around her felt heavier, as though the walls themselves were closing in. He was still watching her, but his eyes now held something far more dangerous than she could comprehend, a smirk, but not one of amusement. It was the kind of look you give someone when you know they're standing on the edge of a cliff and have no idea they're about to fall. "I told you we needed to talk," John said, his voice carrying a coolness that sent another chill down her spine. "But you haven't been listening, have you?" She opened her mouth to respond, to ask him what he knew, but before she could speak, a sudden commotion erupted from inside the mansion. The sound of raised voices, followed by the distinct clink of broken glass, reached her ears, and she instinctively turned toward the chaos. The crowd was in disarray, moving in different directions, some rushing toward the exits, others standing frozen in confusion. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw Tyler in the center of the commotion, surrounded by a few of his high-profile guests. His expression was one of controlled panic, but his eyes were scanning the crowd with a sharpness that betrayed his calm demeanor. Something was happening, something that wasn't part of the plan. It was then that she saw the figure again, the one from earlier in the shadows, moving swiftly toward the back of the building. She could barely make out the details of the person's appearance, but there was no mistaking the way they moved, like someone who was determined to stay unseen but couldn't quite conceal their urgency. She knew she had to follow. But as she made her way toward the back of the mansion, trying to keep a safe distance from the chaos inside, her phone buzzed once more. This time, it was an email. She froze when she saw the sender, Michael Evans, her brother. But this email wasn't one she had received before. She clicked on it, her fingers trembling as the message unfolded. "They're tracking you. It's not just Tyler, there's someone else, someone far more dangerous, pulling the strings. Get out while you can. Trust no one." The words were clear, but the warning came too late. Just as she was about to process the message, a hand gripped her shoulder from behind. She spun around, startled, only to find herself face to face with a woman she had never seen before. Tall, with sharp features, her eyes ice-cold, the woman wore a designer outfit that screamed power. "I've been looking for you," the woman said, her voice smooth yet insistent. "And I think you've been looking for answers. You're not going to find them here, but if you really want to know the truth, you need to follow me." Before she could respond, the woman turned and walked briskly toward the side door, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floors. There was no time to think, no time to hesitate. She glanced over her shoulder to see John, still watching her from the balcony, his expression unreadable. The message from her brother, the cryptic warnings, the sudden appearance of this mysterious woman, it all felt like too much to ignore. She had to make a choice. Was this another player in the game, someone else pulling her strings? Or was this her only chance to uncover the truth? She hesitated for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on her, before finally making up her mind. She stepped forward, following the woman as she led her into the unknown, deeper into the labyrinth of secrets that had already begun to consume her. As they moved through the hidden corridors of the mansion, she couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in, that the truth she sought was being kept just out of reach. But what had she really uncovered so far? The pieces were scattered, each one leading to more questions than answers. And just when she thought she might finally get a glimpse of the whole picture, the woman stopped abruptly and turned to face her. "The one you think you can trust," she said, her voice low and almost conspiratorial. "They're lying to you." The words struck her like a thunderclap. It was as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Who was lying? And why? Before she could ask, the woman's phone rang, and she glanced at the screen with a frown. Without a word, she turned and motioned for her to follow again, faster now, as though they were running out of time. Yes, she followed the mysterious woman through the dimly lit corridors of the mansion, her mind raced with questions, each one more urgent than the last. The flickering lights overhead, the distant sounds of chaos still echoing through the building, and the eerie silence that enveloped them as they moved deeper into the labyrinth all served to heighten her sense of unease. She could feel the weight of every step pressing down on her, as though the mansion itself was alive and watching her every move. The woman, with her cold, calculating demeanor, didn't seem to notice or care that she was being led further away from the crowds, further away from any semblance of safety. And that's when it hit her, the creeping feeling that she was no longer in control, that she was no longer following her own instincts, but someone else's agenda. The reality of her situation was starting to set in, and it was more terrifying than anything she could have imagined. The air around her seemed to grow heavier, thicker, as if the walls were closing in, tightening around her. She had to resist the impulse to stop, to turn back and try to make sense of everything that was happening. But the woman led her forward without a word, her footsteps quickening, as though she knew what was coming next. And just as they reached a secluded door at the end of the hallway, the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift. The house groaned, and for a brief moment, the lights flickered, casting long, sinister shadows across the walls. A feeling of dread washed over her. Something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. The woman stopped and turned to face her, her eyes colder than before. "Don't make a sound," she whispered urgently. "They're watching." The words sank into her chest like ice. Before she could ask what the woman meant, she heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing in the hallway behind them. Someone else was here, following them. Her heart began to race, the sound of her pulse pounding in her ears, drowning out everything else. She instinctively grabbed the door handle, but the woman's hand shot out, stopping her. "Not yet," she said, her voice almost too calm for the urgency of the situation. "We need to be sure we're not being followed." Wait. The seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity, each one heavier than the last. Her breath quickened as she fought the rising panic threatening to take over. She could feel it, the presence of someone else nearby, someone who knew exactly where she was, someone who wanted to stop her from finding the truth. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a new message. It was from Michael. The words were brief, but they hit her like a punch to the stomach. "They're here. Get out. Now." The message didn't make sense. Who was they? Who was after her? And why had Michael suddenly gone silent? She had barely finished reading it when the woman grabbed her arm and yanked her toward the door. There was no time to think, no time to question what was happening. She stumbled after the woman as they slipped through the door into a darkened room. The door clicked shut behind them, muffling the sounds of the footsteps outside. For a moment, everything was still, and she could only hear her own breath coming in shallow gasps. The woman moved swiftly, almost too quickly to follow, and as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she saw that they were in a small, nondescript room, a storage closet, by the looks of it. It wasn't much, just a few boxes and old furniture, but it was the perfect place to hide. As she tried to calm her racing heart, a realization hit her. Something had just shifted. She wasn't just involved in some business deal gone awry. This was bigger than that. This wasn't just a game of high-stakes power moves and corporate deals, it was a battle for her life, and she had no idea who was playing on the other side. The thought made her stomach churn. She couldn't escape this, not now. There was no way out. She was in the middle of something far darker than she had ever imagined, and every move she made seemed to pull her deeper into the web. The woman, still eerily calm, leaned in closer, her voice a low whisper. "You need to trust me. You're not just being watched by Tyler or John. There's someone else, someone much more dangerous. And they've been tracking your every move for days." Her mind raced to process the words, but they didn't make sense. Who was this woman? How did she know all this? And how could she be so sure that Tyler and John were not the only ones involved? As she opened her mouth to ask more, the woman's hand shot out, silencing her. "Listen," she said, her voice tense. "You're not just a pawn in a game anymore. You're a target. And if you want to stay alive long enough to figure out who's behind this, you have to stop trusting everyone. Even me." The words cut through her like a blade. Her mind reeled, trying to make sense of it all. She had been playing a game, trying to fit in, trying to find her way in this world of wealth and power. But now she understood that she was playing with fire. She had been too focused on the people she thought she could trust, Tyler, John, even Michael, when in fact, they were all part of something far more sinister. She couldn't trust anyone, not anymore. The woman's next words were a whisper, barely audible above the pounding of her heart. If you want to survive, you need to disappear. Leave this place, and don't look back. They'll find you if you stay. Before she could respond, a loud crash sounded from the hallway outside the room. It was followed by the unmistakable sound of voices shouting, demanding answers. The footsteps had grown louder, and she realized, with a sinking feeling in her stomach, that they had been followed after all. The woman looked at her one last time, her eyes filled with something that could have been fear, or maybe regret, before she grabbed her by the arm and shoved her toward the back door. "Go now," she said. "You don't have much time." In that instant, the reality of her situation hit her like a freight train. She wasn't just dealing with business rivalries or power struggles, she was tangled up in something far darker, something far more dangerous than she had ever anticipated. And no matter how fast she ran, no matter how much she tried to escape, she knew she was already trapped. The walls were closing in, and the mystery that had seemed like a puzzle was quickly revealing itself to be a nightmare from which there was no waking up. She stepped through the door into the night, the cold air hitting her like a slap in the face. She didn't know where she was going or who she could trust anymore. All she knew was that she had to keep moving. Keep running. But with every step, the fear grew stronger, the questions more urgent, and the sense of being hunted, of being watched, became more real. The truth was out there, somewhere, but now she was afraid to find it as she sprinted through the darkened corridors of the mansion, her mind still reeling from everything that had happened in the past few hours. A strange sensation gnawed at her. The night air, cold and biting as she fled, seemed to amplify her racing thoughts, each one spinning in a chaotic frenzy. She had barely made it out of the building when she heard the sound of someone shouting her name in the distance, loud, frantic. Her heart lurched. She wasn't sure who it was, but the voice was unmistakably familiar. The panic that had been simmering beneath her chest reached a boiling point as she turned a corner, trying to lose herself in the winding paths that led deeper into the estate. The night was a blur, her legs ached, her chest felt tight, but she couldn't stop. Suddenly, the voice caught up with her. "Wait." A hand grabbed her shoulder, pulling her back, and she spun around, almost colliding with the person who had followed her. It was Tyler. Her mind was a jumble of confusion and fear, the words she had rehearsed for moments like this slipping away as she stared at him in disbelief. He looked desperate, his face drawn, his eyes wide with something she couldn't quite place. For a moment, the world around her seemed to slow, the sounds of the wind and the rustling trees fading into the background. "Tyler, what are you doing here?" she managed to whisper, her voice shaky, but the way he looked at her, eyes wide, filled with a mixture of panic and guilt, told her that something wasn't right. "Listen to me," he said urgently, grabbing both of her arms. "You've got to stop. You're in danger. They're coming for you. You need to leave now." His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if he feared someone might hear. But she could hear the tremor in his words, the edge of something that didn't quite belong. She was already running on fumes, the fear clawing at her throat, but now everything inside her was screaming, "What if everything I thought I knew was wrong?" Tyler had been a constant in her life, the person she trusted more than anyone. But now, after everything that had happened, after the chaos of the gala, after the warning from her brother, her mind was unraveling. She needed answers, needed clarity, fast. "Tyler, you need to tell me everything. Why did you lie to me? Why didn't you tell me about them?" She almost spat the words, her frustration mixing with the terror clawing at her insides. Her pulse pounded in her ears, but Tyler just shook his head, his eyes darting to the shadows behind her. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice trembling now. "You've been looking in all the wrong places. You've trusted the wrong people. I didn't want you to get hurt, but..." His voice trailed off, and for a split second, she could have sworn she saw something flicker in his eyes, something that didn't belong there, something like guilt mixed with dread. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, taking a step back from him, her chest tightening with a growing sense of unease. "Who's they? Who's after me, Tyler?" For a long moment, Tyler didn't say anything. The silence between them was thick, almost suffocating, and the longer it stretched on, the more she could feel her stomach churn with a deep, gnawing suspicion. It was as though the weight of the entire situation was starting to settle in, crushing her with the realization that the pieces weren't just scattered, they were being hidden from her. Finally, Tyler's lips parted, but before he could speak, something caught her eye, something in the distance. Someone was watching them. At first, she thought it was just another trick of the shadows, but then she saw him. A figure, standing perfectly still just at the edge of the trees, watching them with a cold, almost predatory stare. The silhouette of the man was unmistakable. It was John. But the look on his face was different now. It wasn't the aloof, calculating expression she had seen before, it was something far darker, more dangerous. Her heart dropped into her stomach as realization set in. Her stomach twisted in horror as she realized what he was saying. Everything she thought she understood, everything she had believed about the gala, about Tyler, about the people she had trusted, was a lie. This wasn't about business deals or corporate power. This wasn't even about betrayal. It was something far more complicated, far more dangerous. And she had just walked straight into the heart of it. "Tyler, please, what are you talking about?" she cried out, reaching for him, but he took another step back, his face darkening. She watched as his hand moved to his jacket pocket, and for a moment, she thought he was going to pull out a weapon, that she was about to become another victim in this twisted game. But instead, he pulled out something far worse. A small, folded piece of paper. Her breath hitched as he handed it to her, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. She opened it quickly, scanning the words written in a hurried, almost illegible hand. As her eyes moved across the page, her world tilted. The letter was addressed to her, but the name at the top wasn't hers. It was someone else's, someone she didn't know. The note itself was short, a simple message that struck her to the core. "It's not over. We're closer than you think. Trust no one, not even Tyler." Before she could react, Tyler's face twisted in pain, his eyes glinting with something darker now, almost as if he had been preparing to say goodbye. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rustling wind. "But the truth is far worse than you realize. You're not supposed to be here." And just like that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving her standing in the cold, gripping the piece of paper with hands that shook violently, the weight of his words crashing over her like a tidal wave. What had she walked into? Who was she really up against? The twisted layers of deception were only beginning to unravel, and now, the stakes were higher than ever. The cold wind bit at her skin as she stood there, holding the crumpled letter in her hands, the weight of it like a lead weight pressing down on her chest. Her mind spun in 1,000 directions at once. The words Tyler had spoken kept echoing in her head, replaying like a broken record. "You're not supposed to be here." She couldn't shake the chilling feeling that she had just stumbled onto something much darker, much more dangerous than she had ever imagined. And with every passing second, the walls around her seemed to be closing in, trapping her in a game she wasn't prepared for. The shadows in the distance seemed to shift, and every rustle in the trees made her heart race even faster. She wasn't safe. Not anymore. But who could she trust? Could she even trust herself? Her thoughts kept spiraling, each one darker than the last. Tyler, once her closest ally, now seemed like a mere pawn in a much larger game. And John, the man who had been playing her like a fiddle from the start, was part of it all too. The very people she had leaned on, the ones she believed would protect her, were now the ones pulling her deeper into this web of lies and deceit. There was no way out. Every possible path she could take seemed to lead her into a dead end. And yet, she couldn't stop herself from moving forward. She had to know the truth, no matter the cost. She couldn't let fear rule her anymore. But the cost was becoming clearer with every passing second, and it wasn't just her life on the line anymore. As she turned and started to make her way back to the mansion, her phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with a message that made her stomach twist. It was from Michael, her brother. "It's time. Meet me at the old warehouse, the one by the docks. Come alone." She didn't even have to read the message a second time to know that the stakes had just been raised. The old warehouse was the last place she wanted to go. It was a relic from the past, old, decrepit, and isolated. She hadn't set foot there in years, and the memories of it made her sick. It was where everything had started, where her family's secrets had first begun to unravel. She had avoided it for a reason. But now, it seemed like the only place left where she could get answers. As she made her way there, her mind raced. What could Michael possibly want now? After everything that had happened, everything she had learned, was he still on her side? Or had he been hiding something all along? The questions piled up, each one heavier than the last. And as she neared the warehouse, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking straight into a trap. But she didn't have a choice. She had to face whatever was waiting for her. When she arrived at the warehouse, the silence was almost suffocating. The tall, rusted doors loomed in front of her like the entrance to some forgotten tomb. Her breath came in quick, shallow bursts as she approached, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the empty space around her. She had made it this far. But what now? Was she about to walk into a confrontation that would change everything? As she stepped through the threshold, the dim lighting revealed nothing but shadows. The vast emptiness of the warehouse seemed to swallow her whole, and for a moment, she almost turned around and fled. But before she could even make up her mind, she heard a voice, low, steady, and all too familiar. "I knew you'd come." Michael stepped out from behind a stack of crates, his face serious, but there was something in his eyes, something she couldn't place. "Michael," she said, her voice wavering with a mix of relief and dread. "What's going on? What are you not telling me?" Her heart was pounding in her chest now, her instincts telling her that this was the moment where everything would change. She had to be ready for anything, but nothing could have prepared her for what he was about to say. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he looked at her with something close to regret before he spoke again, his voice tinged with an almost unbearable sadness. "You don't understand. I didn't want you to get involved in all this, but now it's too late. You're already a part of it." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean, a part of it?" Her breath caught in her throat as she took a step back. "What are you saying, Michael?" He ran a hand through his hair, his expression tortured. "You're not just a pawn in someone else's game. You're the key, the final piece. You were always meant to be in the middle of this, whether you wanted to or not." He paused, watching her, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. "And now, you have a choice to make." A cold chill ran through her. The sense of impending doom was overwhelming now, pressing in on all sides. "What choice? What do you want from me?" Michael took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "There's more to all of this than you realize. I tried to keep you safe, but the truth is it's already out there. And now, you have two options. The first is that you walk away from everything. Leave. Forget about the past, forget about everything you've uncovered, and let them take over. You'll be safe. But you'll never know the full truth." Her heart raced in her chest, her hands trembling as she took a step back. The weight of what he was saying hit her all at once. Could she really walk away? Could she just forget about everything, the lies, the betrayal, and the lives ruined in the wake of this conspiracy? It seemed impossible, but Michael's face, his pain, told her that the other option was far worse. "You're asking me to run," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But what's the second option?" Michael's face twisted with an almost painful mixture of sorrow and anger. "The second option is to stand up, to fight, to uncover everything. But you'll be risking your life, your safety, and possibly the lives of everyone you care about. You'll have to make enemies of people who control everything. And there's no going back once you start. You'll have to expose everything, even the parts of our family that have been buried for years." Her mind spun as she processed his words. The decision before her wasn't just a matter of her own safety, it was about everything she had ever known. She was standing on the precipice of something bigger than herself, bigger than anything she could have imagined. And as the tension between them thickened, she realized that neither option was truly safe. No matter what she chose, there would be consequences. But what was the right choice? What could she live with? Michael's eyes were pleading now, as if silently begging her to make the right decision, but the weight of it all was unbearable. The truth was out there, But at what cost? Would she risk everything to uncover it? Or would she let it all go, and live with the lie? The silence in the warehouse was suffocating, the tension between them thick and almost unbearable. As Michael stood there, eyes locked on her, the weight of the decision hung heavy in the air. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the choice before her seemingly impossible to make. She wanted to walk away. She wanted to close her eyes, forget everything, and pretend that none of this was real. But every fiber of her being screamed that she couldn't. The truth was out there, and now she had to find it, no matter the cost. But just as she opened her mouth to respond, something crashed against the back of the warehouse. The sound echoed in the empty space, jolting her upright, her breath catching in her throat. Michael's eyes widened, and in an instant, the urgency of the situation shifted. "They found us," he whispered, the words barely audible, but the panic in his voice was unmistakable. He spun toward the back door, but she couldn't take her eyes off him. This was it, the moment everything would change. Her body was frozen, unsure whether to stay or run. Before she could make a move, the lights in the warehouse flickered and went out, plunging them into complete darkness. The low hum of electricity was replaced by a deafening silence, and she felt a surge of adrenaline course through her. The fear, the uncertainty, it was all too much. She had to act, had to make a decision. But as the darkness swallowed them whole, her instincts kicked in. She turned toward Michael, who was already moving toward the back door, but then it happened, he stopped, a strange expression crossing his face. His eyes flicked toward the shadows, narrowing, and his jaw clenched. "Don't trust anyone," he muttered, his voice sharp with warning. Before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, vanishing into the darkness. The floor beneath her feet felt like it was spinning, and the sound of her breath was the only thing she could hear as she frantically searched for any sign of where Michael had gone. She couldn't let him disappear, not now, not after everything he had just revealed. But as she rushed toward the back, a sudden crash from behind her made her freeze. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, looming, and unmistakably familiar. It was Tyler. Her heart stopped. Tyler? Was he here to help or betray her? Her mind reeled. He had been so involved in all of this, the gala, the lies, the half-truths, and now here he was, standing in front of her, his eyes glowing in the dim light. "You should have listened," Tyler said, his voice cold, flat. It was like he had become a different person, someone she didn't recognize. "Tyler, what is going on? What the hell are you doing here?" Her voice cracked, and she couldn't help the surge of emotion that flooded her chest. The confusion, the anger, the sense of betrayal, it was too much. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step forward, his face expressionless, but his eyes betraying a flicker of something that looked like regret. But before she could process it, he spoke again, his words cutting through the silence like a knife. "You have no idea what you're up against. No one does. You think this is about you. You think you're at the center of it all. But you're just a pawn in a much bigger game." She took a step back, her breath shallow. "What are you talking about? Who's pulling the strings here, Tyler?" His eyes hardened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something like fear cross his face. "It's bigger than any of us. It's not just about you, or me, or even Michael. You've been played from the beginning, and now you're tangled up in something you can't escape from." The words hung in the air, suffocating her. She could feel the weight of the entire conspiracy pressing down on her. It wasn't just about the gala. It wasn't about the lies she had uncovered. This was much, much bigger. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She was no longer just a victim of this conspiracy. She was part of it. And there was no way out. Suddenly, Tyler lunged at her, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her toward the back door. "We have to go, now." His grip was tight, almost desperate, and the panic in his eyes sent a shiver down her spine. She tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. "What are you talking about? Where are we going?" she gasped, struggling to break free. But Tyler was insistent. "They know everything. They know you're here. They know all of it. We have to leave before it's too late." But before she could process his words, a sound sharp and violent pierced the air. The sound of metal scraping against metal. The doors to the warehouse crashed open, and figures flooded in from every direction. Her pulse quickened as she scanned the room, her eyes landing on familiar faces in the sea of shadows. It was a nightmare. John. He was standing at the entrance, his eyes locked on hers with a dangerous gleam. He wasn't alone. There were others with him, more than she had expected, more than she had realized were involved. And they were closing in. Tyler's grip on her tightened as he pulled her toward a side door, but she dug her heels in, refusing to move. Tyler, no. We need answers. I need to know what's happening, who these people are. His eyes flicked toward her, and for a moment, there was something real behind the cold facade. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words never came. Instead, a sharp crack echoed through the warehouse as a gunshot rang out, followed by the sound of a body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. She whipped around, her eyes locking onto the fallen figure. It was Michael. Everything went still. The room was filled with a ringing silence as she watched Michael's lifeless body on the floor.